We're going live now.
Our program will begin in 5 minutes. Our program will begin in 2 minutes. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Happy Valentine's Day. HCS values feedback, and in the spirit of Valentine's Day, I would say that we love feedback. Fiscal year 2022 AES employee growth is important. To support your growth and career development, we are so pleased to offer you all a resume writing workshop from the keen perspective of the hiring official. My name is Monica Martinez, and I am an employee engagement specialist with the employee experience team, and I will be your host today. I'd like to go over a few housekeeping rules before we get started. Today's event is being recorded. We will place a copy of the recording in our SharePoint site following the event. You will find a link to the SharePoint site in the chat. Please note that your microphone was muted by default when you logged in and should remain muted during the presentation. Live captioning is enabled in Zoom. You can click the live transcript button, which is the box with the CC in the center, and select show subtitle. You can also click view full transcript to view the transcript in the slide panel of the meeting. My colleague, Elizabeth Walter, will be the technical facilitator for today's event. If you run into any trouble, please use the chat feature to contact Ms. Walter directly. Finally, your feedback is important to us. At the conclusion of today's event, a link to a brief survey will appear when you exit the meeting. We will also put the link to the survey in the chat. Please take a moment and let us know what you think. I'd like to bring your attention to today's agenda. We have shared the bios of our panelists in the chat. And now, welcome to our panel for today's event. Ms. Jamie Cannon, Assistant Director of the Los Angeles Regional Office, Ms. Becky Lindstrom, Assistant Director of the Office of Production Optimization, and Mr. Paul Shute, Director of the Office of Benefit Automation. Ms. Cannon, the floor is yours.
All right. Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. We're good? All right. Let's get started. So I think half of you guys, yes, are in my office right now. I have a massive hiring fair. It is true. All of the rumors from St. Pete to Waco, the lines, the excitement for it. It is a ginormous event and it's really cool. So we have the chief of staff here. And I just let her know that I have to pop on and give some training to all of HCS right now. So with that, we will get started with our agenda. Introductions, they were done. We have Paul, Becky, and myself. We're going to go over some resume myths. And I know some of you guys actually go through the resumes and you do a fantastic job getting us our cert. So again, part of this is that sharing knowledge, put in the chat some other things that maybe we miss, but we're just here to also add to a discussion on resumes. Everything we say is suggestions, things we've either experienced, feedback we've actually gotten from HCS. The whole point is to discuss consistency, give ideas, and share. By no means are we saying if you do it this way, you'll get a job. It's just suggestions or how maybe I didn't get a job. So that's what we're talking about. We're going to talk about where to start, our work experience, things to avoid and consider, and maybe give some examples as well at the end. So with that, we will get started with some myths. All right. I would like you guys to interact. So in the chat, you guys can write. So federal resumes, myth, should they be 1 page long? True or false? And I cannot see if people are writing.
It looks like we have a bunch of falses in the chat.
That's great. Yeah, for the most part, that is false. If you have a resume and you can fit all of the knowledge, skills, abilities, and the key piece and your current job is all you want to highlight, and you can keep it to 1 page, that's great. But 1 page is not required. I would say that when we talk about length, having it 10 pages is way too much. You want to be concise. You want to give all of the information, but the big piece is to make sure that you get the best you on this paper for the job you're applying for. And I think we're going to talk more about making sure your resume is attached to the job you're applying for and not just everything you've ever done, because some of that last history might not even be needed. So take it out so they don't need to go through that and they can just see the best you for that job right now. True or false? It needs to be in a particular format.
Looks like we're getting false in the chat.
All right. Correct. It doesn't have to be in an exact format. I think everybody knows that USA Jobs definitely has a resume builder. And when you use the resume builder, it's there to make sure that you guys put all the things that HCS is looking for. Make sure you highlight your knowledge, your skills, your ability, and make sure all of the key pieces are there. Because if you don't have a key piece, then you might not even make it onto the cert. But it doesn't have to be in a particular format. So I suggest looking at the resume builder for USA Jobs, see what that layout is. And then if you have a nice structure that you like, use that one for sure. But the big piece is making sure you highlight the specialized skills, the knowledge, the requirements that are needed for you guys to get to that next phase, that interview phase. Next one, does it require specific content? Let's see, true or false? Does a resume require specific content?
We're getting some truths in the chat.
Okay, I see 2 trues, 3 trues. Okay. And I would say that this is, for the most part, true. When you guys look at the USA Job announcements, and I think the next slide, we actually have those, there are definitely key pieces that need to be in your resume. And the most important part is putting those, the knowledge, the skills, the abilities, all of that into the current jobs that you have. So if you can fit the knowledge, the skills, the abilities, the specialized experience that's required in your current job, that's best. But you definitely need the specific content that's required for the resume for sure. So those that said true, I agree with you. Good job. The next one, resumes. Is it one size fits all? Can you use the same resume for this job, and this job? One size fits all. No, ma'am. Yeah, we got a lot of you shouldn't, knows. And that is correct. I definitely agree with you. For each job that you apply to, your resume should be tailored to that job. So if you have human resource experience in the past and you're applying for an HCS job, you should definitely highlight that and leave that on there. If you were a trainer or a manager in the past and you're applying for a leadership position, you should definitely leave that on there. But definitely tailor your resume to the specific job. So it's not one size fits all. And also, when you tailor your resume, it makes it look like you guys took the time to make sure it fits this position. And it's not just the one you hand out to everybody. So if it looks like you took a little more care in your resume, that goes a long way as well. Another myth, it cannot contain acronyms. The VA is a very heavy acronym soup. So should it contain acronyms? Should it definitely not? What say you? Okay. Yeah. So some of you guys said, yeah, it's okay after you've explained them. And I would agree with that. Is it okay if you guys are applying for a highly technical job and you have VBMS and other acronyms that make it look like you're keenly aware of the technical job that you're applying for, and maybe you don't spell those out? I don't think you would get that would get lost. But for the most part, if it's something that might be from another outside position coming in, definitely spell it out. You just want to make sure that everything that you're looking at, the person who is going to pick you for this job understands and needs no explanation. So in VBA, if you're looking for a VSC job and you use VBMS, you probably be okay. But if you use a private sector acronym and you're applying for a VSC job, you're probably going to want to spell that out. You just want to make sure everything you have on your resume doesn't leave a question. You don't want somebody to say, what did they mean by that? Yeah, so you guys got it. Explain it, make sure it's clear. That's perfect. All right, so the last one covers your last 10 years only. Is that true or false, that your resume should only cover your last 10 years? I have one brave soul. Let's keep going. Should it cover the last 10 years? False, true? Let's see. 7 to 10. Yeah, so I don't know if anybody else is going to pop in there and be brave. Again, it's not one size fits all. We already debunked that one. In general, again, you're looking to be as concise as possible. If you're applying for a position, let's say you were in the military and you were an HR specialist in the military, but your military, ended 15 years ago. Would it be relevant if you're applying for an HCS position or a human resource position to put that on there? I think it would be. I do. Does that go over this 10 years? Yes. But is it relevant and actually adds a little more credence and knowledge to the position you're applying for? Yeah. So I would say that 7 to 10 is good because that's usually the ladder that you're climbing. But if there's something new that you're looking out to branch out to, and you need to pull back from 15 years ago because it really highlights something that you want that employer to know, go ahead and put it on there. So in general, I like 7 to 10 years. I think that is probably your resume is going to speak to that gradual progression of where you guys want to go. So that's great. But there's no harm in putting something on there that really shows you have this position in the past and you're looking to step back into it. Please look at this. And that's okay as well. All right. So who's seen this? Who's seen a VBA, a USA Jobs application or link? All right. So this is about, yeah, I'm sure all of you guys have. Yes. So this is about where to start. Where do you start in your resume, right? You definitely want to tailor, and we said this in the last slide, you want to tailor your resume to the occupation that you are applying for. So here, clinical administrative specialist, you really want to tailor your resume to show that that is the next progression in your career. This is definitely where you want to go. Make sure that the occupation is definitely the one you choose, and that your resume is geared and tailored towards that. The next part there is the duties. So the duties in the application there show everything that's going to be required. Maybe it's to analyze, maybe it's to pull reports, maybe it's to go out in the community, maybe it's to hold meetings, draft correspondence. All of these duties that you see there is really, really important that you put that in your resume. And the other thing that I could say that's really important is if you have these duties, these specialized skills, the knowledge, the ability, and all of that that's in the job announcement, try to put those in your current position, because sometimes they'll look for a GS-14 position, and here's the specialized experience, here's the duties that are assigned. And if you put that maybe in a grade level of a GS-12, as they're going through your resume, they'll say, but they don't have that specialized experience at the grade level that's needed, which is at maybe a GS-14 for a year having these abilities. So make sure that when you're looking through the duties, the specialized experience and all of that, put what you can, obviously don't fib, but put what you can in your most current position at that grade level to make it known to everybody that the specialized experience is at the grade level and you have these duties and you're currently doing them at that level, because that's really important when people are going through your resume to make sure that you're qualified. And then the other one there is the qualifications. There's the GS level. Again, some of the specialized skill that's required, and just other big pieces there that are going to highlight your ability to do this job and this occupation. So that is where you would start with your resume. You have your job, you're going to match your resume to those duties. You're going to use bold words, and I know we're going to talk about those. You're going to show those results afterwards as well. And I'll say this when we're talking about our resumes, and I know that Becky and Paul are going to go into this in more detail as well. The first part of the resume is to get through the door. It's to get onto the cert. So make sure that you're matching and tailoring it to the job. So that's first. Then when you make it onto the cert, your resume is not done. It's then reviewed by a panelist. And some of it is maybe just the aesthetic part of the resume. You know, you can go 1, 3, or 5 for, grammar and appearance and all of that. And also, as you go higher, your competencies on that resume will be a qualification. And then they'll go through your resume to see 1 through 5, this competency or this knowledge and skill set, this one. And so your resume first gets you through the door. Then part of it is going to be used at the end for your to BQ you as well for just aesthetics. And then also what's the substance part of it as well. So, and with that, I will turn it over.
Thank you, Jamie. So once you've completed those initial steps and you kind of understand what are the different duties of the position that you're applying for, and you're thinking about that in relation to your qualifications, we really want you to be able to highlight your accomplishments in a way that helps the hiring manager understand what you bring to the table. So there's a couple different approaches to this. The one that we're highlighting here, we call kind of the STAR model, or situation, task, action, results. You may have heard this referred to as the CAR model 2, challenge, context, action, results, very similar. The most important thing here is that you're providing some context around, or some background information around, a challenge or situation or problem that you were trying to solve, and then what your role was in that effort, and then highlighting specific actions. What were the things that you did to help achieve the goals that you set out to achieve? Were you working with other organizations? Did you stand up integrated project teams? And then really one of the key components here is being able to quantify those results. And when we think about how do you quantify the results, there's a couple areas that are often very impactful. Cost savings is something where you're able to show the value that you brought to the project or initiative that you led. Another important thing is if you were able to exceed expectations by shipping a product or delivering a capability before the anticipated deadline. Were you able to do something, on schedule, under cost, things like that. Also, were you recognized for the work that you did? A lot of us, have received special contribution awards or recognized by our peers. Sometimes even recognized by industry or federal government in general. So those are important things to highlight in relation to your work. And then again, really focusing on what's the change or improvement that you made. And oftentimes this is where you're able to present some data. How were things functioning before you started tackling this problem? And then how did the work that you do change? How did that improve timeliness? How did that improve accuracy? How did that improve employee experience? Things like that. So again, as you're framing up all of your accomplishments, it's important to not just list the responsibilities. We all know what our responsibilities are from our position description, but being able to provide real tangible, quantifiable examples of that from your everyday job is really important. And that really helps the hiring manager better understand the value that you brought to your organization or your previous roles, and what they can anticipate that you bring to the new role that you're applying for. So as we think about this work experience, we also have some what we like to refer to as memory joggers. So on the next slide, there's a few that I wanted to highlight. And again, we won't go through all of these together. These are some things that you can think about as you're crafting your STAR or challenge, context, action, result accomplishments. So a couple of the areas that I often like to call out specifically is areas where you've improved a work process. These are really great examples to show how kind of your leadership or your influence over a program or process has really improved things for veterans, employees, or the agency. And then, being able to think about, were those improvements, how did that increase productivity? Did it allow employees to work more efficiently? Did it allow employees to provide veterans faster, more accurate decisions? Was there a time or cost savings associated with it? Again, those are really good areas that are measurable. That you all are probably tracking in your everyday work as you're, building out key performance indicators and things like that for projects. So those are things that you can definitely refer to. And then were you asked to lead specific project teams or special initiatives? Those are, really great examples to highlight, because that's where it's showing that, again, you're kind of going above and beyond. And how does that factor into, your ability to lead people? We talk about leading people. It's, obviously one of our executive core qualifications, but something that, you're often called to do in your everyday job. So talking about how you've led certain groups, have you mentored or trained others? Those are important things to capture here as you're describing your accomplishments. And then again, if you're responsible for a budget, if the work that you do impacts cost savings in any way, those are really good examples to be able to highlight as you're describing the work that you've completed over the years. So next, we'll get into some of the things to avoid and consider. I'll turn it over to Becky.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, so some of the items, Jamie touched on this and Paul has touched on them a few as well. So definitely things, to avoid. I don't want to read anything, to you, but definitely wanted to touch on them and some of the very easy things to correct. Spelling and grammar errors, those catch our eye right away. As Jamie mentioned, sometimes in a hiring panel, one of the items that is reviewed is spelling, grammar, the aesthetic of how the resume looks. That is considered in the review. Another item here, personal beliefs. You're applying, most likely for a government job. We truly believe that your personal beliefs should be out of your resume. We all have them, but not quite the right place to be putting your own personal beliefs. And Jamie touched on this one too when she said, don't fib. So don't fabricate or inflate your duties or responsibilities or your, experience. You just never know who might be reviewing that resume. As an example, I've reviewed, hundreds of resumes, and I've worked with a lot of the folks, that resumes that I was reviewing. I'm like, that's not quite, what you did for that project. And they may ask in the interview. So, as they're reviewing the resume and something looks, well, you know what, I'm not quite sure about that one, I'm going to ask in the interview. So just be very careful about fabrication or inflation there. Items to consider, Paul touched on the STAR model and, quantifying results. Want to look at the action verbs as well. So these are those words that catch my eye when I'm reviewing resumes. I collaborated, expedited, some of those action verbs that are really going to catch my eye as I'm reviewing some resumes. And then one of the bottom ones there that really we like to touch on a lot is a peer review. I'm going to take Paul's example that he usually gives because he's not briefing this slide. So I'm going to take his example. If you're walking down a street and you have your resume in hand, give it to someone who doesn't understand VA or doesn't understand exactly what you're applying for, and have them review it, because that might bring out additional questions or things that may need additional explanation. Additionally, they're going to find those spelling and grammar errors that you may miss just because you've read your resume so often. Touching on one additional one, quantifying the results, that's an eye catcher. Anytime that you can add, cost savings or any sort of number that catches folks' eyes as well. So consider putting that information in there. And one thing definitely to avoid, and you're fine, Jesse, is, when you're doing your resume and you have your list of responsibilities from your current position description or from your performance standards, do not list those items in your resume word for word. There are similar, we all know some of the PDs out there or the performance standards, and you can tell right away when folks are just going through and listing their standards or their specific responsibilities from their PD. So as we've said before, tailor it to your actual role and responsibility. Really, try to avoid copy and pasting from a job description, a PD, or a performance standard. Okay, so we've talked a lot about these items. gonna open it up. Jamie started with some questions earlier, opening it up. So, here's some examples and asking folks, you can post in the chat. I think you can come off mute, not quite sure. But can you find the error here in this resume? And note, these are actual resumes that we did take this from. So these are real life examples out there. So, okay, and I'm seeing, yep, should be field and not filed. You are 100% correct. So that was something, that stood out. And Jesse, if you want to move forward, you can see where we circle that one. Obviously, filed is a word. So, and I think Jesse, just one more forward. I'm not sure why that's not coming up. If you just want to keep going forward, Jesse, until you see the red circle come up. There we go. So yeah, so it's going to, this isn't going to be found in a spell check because filed is a word, obviously, but when you're reading it or when someone's peer reviewing it, they might have caught that. Okay, Jesse, next one, please. Okay, so in this example here, does this tell us much about the person's experience? Where, this is a coach, a supervisor, and they wrote, they had previously wrote systematic analysis of operations according to requirements in M21.4. And no, this doesn't tell us much. This may be something that's actually from their performance standards. As a coach, they are required to write SAOs, or are now called SOARs if, we're in 2023 now. So, a different way that this could be written. And Jesse, if you want to move forward. Let's see if it pops up. Maybe once, there we go. Okay, so here they analyze, there's using that action word. They analyze data and procedures according to requirements outlined in M21.4. And then they provided recommendations to senior leadership to ensure compliance. So that's using that STAR model. They're using those action verbs of what they specifically did. Instead of just writing SAOs, they actually analyzed the data and then they took it forward and provided those recommendations. And if you wanted to take it even further, which we can here, is what were the results from those recommendations? Okay, Jesse, next slide, please. Okay, so this is an example, and I'm gonna say here, I'm not gonna get on a soapbox, but this is hard for me to read. While there is no specific way that you are supposed to write your resume, it can be in paragraph form. Just remember that folks are reviewing this, and in order for things to pop out, it might benefit the reviewer to see it in a bullet form. It's not required, but when we're all looking at this, is this a little bit difficult to read and then to really try to find all of those items that we're looking for? The content here is great. It's using action verbs. It has, quantifying data. It's just a little tough to read. So Jesse, if you want to move forward. Here we go. So this might be a better way to look at, that specific item here. So just taking some of it, bulleting it, making it a little more reader friendly so that it can really stand out on its own and the user doesn't have to go through that paragraph line by line to really identify those items that we're looking for. Okay, so this is one of our last examples here. So listing the relevant university courses taken. So one of the items that we like to talk about is, and we have talked about, is really listing that relevant experience. So, in some of these positions, listing out all of your classes that you took in college might not be the most relevant for the position. But let's say, I'm applying for a public speaking position. I might want to list specifically public speaking degree or, something like that. But listing out all of the courses that you took in college might not be the most beneficial, and it takes up a lot of space on your resume. So, we do talk about, limiting the resume to about 5 pages or less. For reference, I think mine's at 3. Paul usually tries to one up me and say his is at 2.5, but really limiting the size of that resume so that you're just listing all of that relevant experience. So another way to list this might be, and Jesse, if you want to move forward, should pop up on the next one. There we go. So listing it as education. Unless you need a specific degree listed or a certification listed for that position, would recommend, not taking up space and just listing relevant education or additional relevant experience, relevant certification, because this does take up, that space there on the resume. Okay. So a lot of information put forward there. Wanted to really highlight the items that we've talked about. So Jamie covered, review the job announcement, tailor that resume to highlight the knowledge, skills, and abilities. I'm going to add on there, don't copy your PD, your performance standards, your previous job announcement, or your job announcement that you're applying for. Make it relevant and don't copy and paste that information. Paul talked about the STAR method. So really looking at the situation, task, and action and results, using those action verbs, quantifying the information and items like that. Touched a little bit on the limiting the resume to 3 to 6 pages. Remember, folks, I think Paul will come back on and he's going to give a stat of how many minutes or seconds folks are, may actually be reviewing resumes. It's not as much as you think it is. So really want to make sure that that information is easy to find and that it's concise. So try to limit it as necessary or as you can, to 3 to 6 pages. One of the most important things, really have someone proofread it and edit your resume. I know that asking for feedback can sometimes be tough. It's something that I struggle with. I truly hate asking for feedback and having folks review my work, but it makes me, a better person, and it makes a better product as well. And last, but certainly not least, be confident in your resume. Don't fabricate though. Be clear and be concise. Okay, going to open it up to Paul and Jamie to see if there were any additional items they wanted to touch on, and then we'll open it up for questions.
I think you captured a lot of it. I'll say one of the best recommendations that I ever got from an HCS representative, and this was our employee, and this was back, probably over 12 years ago now, before I came to central office, was being able to weave in the knowledge, skills, and abilities into your accomplishment statements. So really looking at that job description and saying, what are the things that they're looking for in an employee? And then figuring out how to weave that into your accomplishments. And this gets back to the one-size-fits-all solution. It's very easy to fall in love with a resume that you kind of create for yourself and say, wow, this one really highlights who I am as an employee. This will get me any job that I want. But the problem is each job's different, and really being able to not fall in love with one version of your resume and really tailor it to each individual job is just so important. I don't know if it was causation or correlation, but shortly after I updated my resume in that way, I ended up getting hired out here in central office, and the rest is history. So great advice from a colleague in HCS. They reached out kind of unsolicited, just based on some work that we were doing together and what they had seen. So again, I think it's just important. As Jamie said, you want to present your best self. And sometimes, you want to make sure, or you always want to make sure that it's specific to the job that you're trying to get. So, and as Becky mentioned, a fact that I think you all have probably seen elsewhere. I think it's kind of used across industry, but it says basically hiring managers on average look at resumes for between 30 and 60 seconds. Now, it's kind of scary to think about that. I'd say a quick review of a resume is good, but I don't know that I've ever been able to condense it to that period of time. But it speaks to, those action verbs that Becky mentioned, and really being able to highlight and draw people's attention to those skills as quickly as possible. Understanding that, oftentimes we get hundreds of resumes for a specific job, and there's a lot to comb through. So the earlier you can call a hiring manager's attention to your unique attributes, the better. So again, things that were already discussed, but I think I always kind of reflect on in conversations like this.
And I will just add, less is more. And when you give your resume to somebody, because I was really proud of my resume and it was 6 pages, 7 pages long. And I was asked to like cut so much. You don't need that. That doesn't tell you anything. And they just went through it almost like virtually with this big red ink, like take all this out. And I was almost hurt that it's like, well, that's my life that you're asking me to pretty much delete. Do not think of it like that, because much like Paul, after I did it and I deleted all this stuff and all this, all of a sudden job opportunities came up, and it definitely worked out for me too. But I remember the person I gave it to was just like, delete that. You don't even need that. This doesn't. And I was just like, but that's a part of me. It's not, guys. You just want what's on paper and what that job description is to match. And like Paul said, and I'll say it again, is those KSAs, the knowledge, the skills, the abilities, the specialized experience, the more you could put in your most current grade, the better, because again, they have 60 seconds and they want to see that you're doing those things now, opposed to finding it, three pages down. So whatever you can put and highlight up front is best, and then kind of go from there. So yeah, that's my advice as well.
Yeah, we do have a couple questions here in the chat. I did receive one question from a colleague who could not attend today's meeting, but she did want me to ask. So the 2 questions that we have here in the chat are, what resume tips would you share with anyone trying to change career fields or move from one division to another? And there's another question in the chat here that says, she noticed that all of the bios are 1 page. Do you have any recommendations for writing bios?
Yeah, Monica, I'll take a stab at the first one, and Jamie and Paul can correct me or highlight everything that I've said that was absolutely correct. Just kidding. Recently in my current position, and why I was willing to offer this one up is completely did a career change. So I was previously in the office of administrative review, OAR, dealing with appeals, operations, moved into a more IT role, save you the nitty gritty there, but it is very IT heavy. So in my previous position, had operations, new one, needed to rely on a lot of IT items. So in moving to a career, a different field, had a look at, the knowledge, skills, and abilities, and make it fit, if you will, to my previous experience in all of my different roles within the agency. And you'll see that there are similarities. So, with IT, you're still managing operations of IT, or still managing people, just in a little bit different avenues. So when you're looking at that, try not to get overwhelmed with thinking, well, I don't have any experience in IT. You do have relevant experience. It might not be extremely specific to that position, but most folks, how to manage people, how to move operations within the agency. A lot of it comes down to that core experience. that can be used, in different positions as well. So my advice is try not to limit yourself in thinking that, oh, this is overwhelming, I can't do this. It's really looking at how my previous experience can relate or is relevant to that new experience.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And having a similar type of journey, I started as a claims processor in a regional office, and then came out to headquarters to work with our policy and procedure staff, and then now working much more in a technology-focused role. It's surprising when you look at your work history how many transferable skills you actually have. And you do have to kind of take a step back and think about what your roles were less than the tasks. And I think this was great advice that Becky presented, where getting some feedback from people who might not work with you every day, and being able to describe your work in a way that anybody could understand. And I think that's when you zoom out a little bit, you're able to see your skill set in a much different light, and then you're able to relate that to whatever that future role is. So I think we live in a world where specialization is very much encouraged and sometimes incentivized. And, I think being able to broaden a little bit and be less specialized and kind of have experience in a lot of different areas will help you as you kind of think about maybe embarking on a new journey with a career or taking on a new role. And sometimes, just thinking about the work that you do, not from a perspective of specialization, but how it applies more broadly, like Becky was saying, and managing projects, managing programs, leading operations. I think that's definitely great advice that Becky provided.
I'm just gonna say ditto. I just think that that's it. Just making sure what the job announcement is and being able to put those specialized things in your resume. But like Paul and Becky said, you guys are probably doing much more and doing all these things that fit into these other compartments that you think you're only in this compartment. But yeah, analyzing data, meeting with stakeholders, writing briefs, all of that is transferable, like Paul said. So you guys are probably not in a niche so much that you think. You're probably, able to do so much more across all these divisions already.
And I think, Monica, the other question was about writing a bio. I feel like that's sometimes more challenging than writing a resume, because it's, you're focusing less on the accomplishments. I mean, sometimes there are some accomplishment statements written in there, but it's really kind of thinking about how you want to describe your career track, or your journey throughout your career. I think the best thing is to really, oftentimes an interviewer might ask, tell me something about yourself. And, hopefully you've kind of thought about your career, you've reflected on it, where you've been in the past, where you're headed, what you want to take on in the future. And I think that's very true with bios too. You want to be able to have someone in a couple paragraphs kind of understand your career trajectory and maybe where you're headed in the future. And so just being able to kind of describe it and then start to put those words on a page is important. I think, one of the limitations with bios is it is typically focused on the different roles that you've had. And sometimes that can be limiting, but if you're able to kind of describe those things in a way that show, just how your early career activities are contributing to where you are today, and you can kind of paint that picture for people, I think that's what's most valuable. You want them to be able to see your bio and kind of understand some of those contributions, and you're not always able to you don't have the amount of space or time to be able to talk about all the different accomplishments. So you have to be kind of crafty in how you weave that in. But yeah, I hate writing bios. I change mine constantly, and not because I have a lot of new roles, just because there's different ways that I want to present the information.
I was gonna say what Paul said at the end. I change my bio a lot for who or where it's supposed to go, for sure. If it's supposed to go out into the community, I might use more global perspective. And if it's, you know, more for my office or other within, I might, you know, share a little more. I think the big thing is you want to highlight yourself, and they should walk away with one thing and try to put that one thing in there. You know, my passion right now, especially in LA, is homeless. So I will put that in my bio, because if anybody grabs it in the community, I want them to know, oh, they'll come to me, because I want that kind of, you know, interaction right now. But if I was in a different field or something like that, I might put something else that really highlights it, so people would come to me for that as well. But that's,
Is there, do we have any other questions from our attendees? Anything else in the chat? There's some kudos for you guys. Thank you so much. Just give it another few seconds to see if there are any other questions coming from the chat. Doesn't look like there's any other questions in the chat. Okay, I just wanted to thank our panel. Thank you for your transparency, your tips, and your desire to support our HCS employees' growth and development. We put the link, we will put the link for today's event, for survey for today's event, in our chat. The link should also pop up as you guys are exiting the meeting. We thank you in advance for taking a few moments to complete and share your thoughts. To our audience, thank you guys so much for joining us today. We invite you to join us tomorrow at noon Eastern time for our Color of Leadership panel. This concludes our program, and thank you, everybody. Have a great VA day.
Thanks, everyone.